takes 38. Huh? 39. Didn't Kesava give class yesterday? Wasn't his verse 37? Huh? 38. Oh, okay. Oh, not that it matters. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jai Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tiravanachari Jamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tiravanachari Jamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. Jai Om Vishnupada Paramahamsa Prirajikacharya Astottara Sadashi Śrīmad, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki, Ananta Kodi Vaishnava Vrinda Ki, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki, Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Siva Sadi Gaur Bhaktivedanta Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kundi Giri Govardhana Ki, Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki, Shri Mayapura Navajait Dham Ki, Shri Purushotam Chetra Ki, Shri Ganga Mai Ki Jai, Shri Chamuna Mai Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Tulsi Devi Maharani Ki Jai, Gantaraj Śrīmad Bhāgavatam Ki Jai, Nitai Gaura Premanande. Oh glories to the assembled devotees, oh glories to the assembled devotees, oh glories to the assembled devotees, oh glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga, oh glories to Srila Prabhupada. Swami Nityanamane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pujane Navasesa Sunivadi Pastat Shatani. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're reading from Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, Canto 7, The Science of God. Chapter 7, What Prahlad Learned in the Womb, text number 39. Raya kalatram pasavas sutadayo Raya kalatram pasavas sutadayo Kriha mahi kunjara kosha bhutaya Sarvirtha kamakshana bangurayusha Kurvanti martyasya kiyat priyam chalaha Raya kalatram pasavasutadayo Kriha mahi kunjara kosha bhutaya Sarvirtha kamakshana bangurayusha Kurvanti martyasya kiyat priyam chalaha Raya kulatram pasavasudadayo Kriha mahi kunjara kosha bhutaya Savirta kamakshana bung Kurvanti matyasya kiyat priyam chalaha Raya kalatram pasavasudadayo Kriha mahi kunjara kosha bhutaya Sarvirtha kamakshana bangurayushaha Kurvanti matyasya kiyat priyam chalaha Kayat kalatram pasavasudadayo Kriha mahi kunjara kosha bhutaya Savirta kamakshana banguraya saha Kurvanti matyasya kiyat priyam kalaha. Ladies? Raya kalatram pasavasutadayo Kriha mahi kunjara kosha bhutaya Savirta kamakshana bangurayushaha Kurvan matyasya kiyat priyam chalaha Raya kalatram pasavasutadayo Kriha mahi kunjara kosha bhutaya Savirta kamakshana bangurayushaha Kurvanti matyasya kiyat priyam chalaha Raya kalatram pasavasutadayo Kriha mahi kunjara kosha bhutaya Savirta kamakshana bangurayushaha Kurvanti matyasya kiyat priyam chalaha Rayaha, wealth. Kalatram, one's wife, and feminine friends. Pashava, domestic animals, like cows, horses, asses, cats and dogs. Sutta Adayaha, children and so on. Griha, big buildings and residences. Mahi, land. Kunjara, elephants. Kosha, treasury house. Bhutaya, and other luxuries for sense gratification and material enjoyment. Sarve, all. Artha, economic development. Kamaha, and sense gratification. Kshana bhangura, perishable in a moment. Ayushaha, of one whose duration of life. Kuravanti, affect or bring. Martyasya, of one who is destined to die. Kiyat, how much? Priyam, pleasure. Chalaha, flickering and temporary. One's riches, beautiful wife and female friends, one's sons and daughters, one's residence, one's domestic animals like cows, elephants and horses, one's treasury, economic development and sense gratification, indeed, even the lifetime in which one can enjoy all these material opulences are certainly temporary and flickering. Since the opportunity of human life is temporary, what benefit can these material opulences give to a sensible man who has understood himself to be eternal? Purport. This verse describes how the advocates of economic development are frustrated by the laws of nature. As the previous verse asks, Kim Vishayo Papadanai, what is the actual benefit of so-called economic development? The history of the world has factually proved that attempts to increase economic development for bodily comfort through the advancement of material civilization have done nothing to remedy the inevitability of birth, death, old age and disease. Everyone has knowledge of huge empires throughout the history of the world. The Roman Empire, the Mughal Empire, the British Empire, and so on. But all the societies engaged in such economic development, Savertakamaha, have been frustrated by the laws of nature through periodic wars, pestilence, famine, and so on. Thus, all their attempts have been flickering and temporary. In this verse, therefore, it is said, Kuravanti Martyasya Kiyat Priyam Chalaha. One may be very proud of possessing a vast empire, but such empires are impermanent. After 100 or 200 years, everything is finished. All such positions of economic development, although created with great endeavour and hardship, are vanquished very soon. Therefore, they have been described as chalaha. An intelligent man should conclude that material economic development is not at all pleasing. The entire world is described in Bhagavad Gita as Dukkhalayam Asashvatam, miserable and temporary. Economic development may be pleasing for some time, but it cannot endure. Thus many big businessmen are now very morose because they are being harassed by various plundering governments. In conclusion, why should one waste his time for so-called economic development, which is neither permanent nor pleasing to the soul? On the other hand, our relationship with Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is eternal. Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema. The pure souls are eternally in love with Krishna. And this permanent love, either as a servant, a friend, a parent, or a conjugal lover, is not at all difficult to revive. Especially in this age, the concession is that simply by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama eva kevalam, one revives his original relationship with God, and thus becomes so happy that he does not want anything material. As enunciated by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Nadanam, Najanam, Nasundarim, Kavitam va Jagadisha Kamaye. A very advanced devotee in Krishna consciousness does not want riches, followers, or possessions. Raya kalatram pasava sudadayo grihamahi kunjara kosha bhutayaha. The satisfaction of possessing material opulences, although perhaps of a different standard, is available even in the lives of dogs and hogs, who cannot revive their eternal relationship with Krishna. In human life, however, our eternal, dormant relationship with Krishna is possible to revive. Therefore, Prahlad Maharaj has described this life as artardam. Consequently, instead of wasting our time for economic development, which cannot give us any happiness, if we simply try to revive our eternal relationship with Krishna, we will properly utilize our lives. Amagana timirandasya Gyananjana salakaya Chakshurun militam jena Tasmaye Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Svayam Rupakada Mahiyam Dadati Sva Padantikam Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Bande Sri Gurum Dinatarinam. So, what's a word that sums up the material world, considering the first half of this purport that starts with an A and has 4 letters in it? Ends with a T. Asat. Yes, asat. Sat means permanent and asat means temporary. So Prahlad Maharaj is instructing his friends in the science of bhakti, basically, what he learnt in the womb. And as Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita, there's no, what is it? Na sato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate sataha. Of the temporary, there is no endurance. This is basic, very, very basic Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, right? All of the essential teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada quotes Bhaktivedanta Thakur, the last purport. The whole of the Bhagavad Gita is contained within the second chapter. Right? So like a summary of all of the information that's to come. So this is very what should we call it? Foundational, fundamental. That the material world is a place of impermanence. That it's always in a state of flux or change. And so Krishna encourages us to not be too attached to the experiences, to the exchanges between the senses and the objects of the senses, because they're temporary. Yahi samspasaja bhoga dukkha yonaya evate, isn't it? Adyantavanta kunteya nateshu ramate buddha. Intelligent person doesn't take pleasure in these temporary exchanges. Although Prabhupada mentions here they're real, there is some pleasure, and that's unfortunately our downfall, because there is some pleasure to be enjoyed in engaging the senses with the objects of the senses. But the warning is, it's temporary. And of course, there has to be some engagement of the senses with the object of the senses, because we're embodied, we're in the material world. We can't ignore our engagement with the engagement of the senses with the objects of the senses. That's why the process of bhakti is very, very powerful. Even though it's a simple set of activities, it's very, very powerful. Because, you know, there's this, I've mentioned this many times, there's the notion of a yogi as one who sits in one place and restrains the senses from the objects of the senses, right? Not to be disturbed. But we know from history, if we look at who's an example of a yogi who tried to restrain his senses and wasn't successful. Who are the examples? Sobhari, yeah, here's the one. He went underwater. But got disturbed looking at the fish. And other examples. So the process of bhakti is actually quite different. There's a recognition, and Krishna mentions, what will repression accomplish? Right, so you know this. The yogi, you know, sitting going to restrain his mind and senses is doomed to failure if we look at the history, right? Whereas the activities of the devotee are, he's engaged in activity. But it's an activity by which the senses are controlled, not that the senses are uncontrolled. And so therefore, Rupa Goswami has given us so many instructions. Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada says, the first duty of a devotee is to take shelter of a spiritual master. Guru Pada-asraya. Right? And that's what we do. Our preaching in ISKCON is we first of all introduce anybody to Prabhupada, to Srila Prabhupada, our Acharya, our Guru. And Srila Prabhupada spent all of his life, pretty much, certainly the latter years of his life, teaching us, teaching his disciples, teaching everyone, and teaching by example, therefore Acharya, how to engage in the process of bhakti yoga by absorbing one's senses and one's thoughts, one's words. What is it? Kamana manasa gira. Jivans muktas uchyate. If you're engaging your activities, your speech and your thoughts in Krishna's service, then you're considered liberated. Jivan mukta. Right? So, the activities of material pursuit are, we were given a warning here. Don't place all of your hopes and aspirations in being materially successful. In other words, one has to be somewhat detached, because in the material world, everything is coming and going. Right? In the beginning, there's no existence. In the middle, there's some manifestation. And then at the end, what happens? Poof, gone, right? We're gone. And so the acquisition of temporary things is a distraction. Huh? It's a distraction. If that's what we put all of our attention into doing. Whereas in the human form of life, and this is Prahlad Maharaj's message to his friends, in the human form of life, certainly we have to do some work. There has to be some activity. There will be some accumulation of possessions. But a devotee understands that those things are limited and temporary, and so doesn't place all of their attention into accumulating those things. Knowing that sooner or later they'll be plundered, either by the time factor or, Prabhupada mentions here, by the government. Right? The government's stealing your money. No, not stealing. You have to pay taxes. Right? Mind you, the government's also fighting with the citizens who are stealing money off of them as well. It's a den of thieves, actually. So, but the real benefit, the advantage of the human form of life is to acquire something which is permanent and that can't be taken away. And that is the reawakening of our Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada quotes that verse. What is it? Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema. Nitya Siddha Krishna, the eternal perfection of Krishna Prema is in the heart of everyone. Just needs to be reawakened. And so the real benefit, the real advantage of the human form is to engage in those activities within which, or wherein which, the natural love for Krishna will manifest spontaneously. This is the advantage of bhakti, especially Panchanga Bhakti, the 5 activities of bhakti that will naturally elicit an eruption, if you like, or an explosion, a manifestation of that Krishna Prema. And so we've in the previous verses we've seen all of these descriptions, how a devotee, when he's or she's chanting Hare Krishna, then naturally out comes symptoms of love and affection for Krishna, love and affection for the devotees. Shouting, laughing, rolling on the ground, crying. The devotee sees Krishna and becomes enthusiastic, but then when Krishna disappears, he becomes very unhappy, very sad. So there's jubilation and what was it we were discussing the other day? Horripilation, symptoms of ecstasy. and a disdain for material existence. This naturally arises. The devotee becomes so happy chanting Hare Krishna and realizing their relations, their eternal identity as a servant of Krishna in the beginning, right? Become so happy and enthusiastic and determined that material pursuits are just seen as if they're a waste of time. What a waste of time. Huh? And so, and you know, of course, this is what people are scared of. Oh, if I get involved with the Hare Krishnas, then I'll have to give up my material life. But it just comes naturally. It's not like it's a imposition. A devotee happily engages in devotional service and happily disregards material existence, even though there may be, there has to be some engagement with the material energy. So these symptoms of detachment will naturally manifest in the behaviour of a devotee, and so he's not concerned too much about what people think of what he's doing, because of, what is it? Pratyak savagamam damyam susukam kartam avyayam. Right? Very happy. Devotee is very happy to chant Hare Krishna. And even if the materialists chastise him and tell him, go and get a job, right? Why don't you get a job? The devotee is thinking, this is my job. I'm happy chanting Hare Krishna, this is my work. But of course that upsets the materialist, because the materialist plays great focus and attention on getting ahead, making, money, acquiring, gaining material acquisition. And a devotee is then a threat. We see that with Prahlad Maharaj, or we'll see it coming up, right? Hiranyakashipu got very disturbed by the behavior of his devotee son, because his focus is always on serving Krishna, not fulfilling his material duties, or at least the attention to the material duties slackens because of the rising of love and affection for Krishna. So Prabhupada makes the point, this is the real benefit of the human form of life, is to reawaken that which is permanent. Our relationship with the impermanent is temporary, and we do so out of duty. Some basic activities of maintenance are required. But the main effort in the human form of life is to reawaken our dormant love for Krishna. And so that's where the focus, or that's where the attention of a devotee resides. Yeah. Therefore, Prahlad Maharaj has described this life as arthadam. Instead of wasting time for economic development, which cannot give any happiness, although previously in the purport Prabhupada says it gives some bit of happiness, right? But he says here, it can't really give you any happiness because it's there for a little while, but then take it away, right? But if we revive our Krishna consciousness, that's something that is a permanent source of satisfaction. Satchit Ananda. When we realize our spiritual identity, then we'll naturally be happy, situated in a permanent state of happiness, not a state of happiness that's dependent on material situations which are always flickering and temporary in any case. And then Prabhupada says here, if we simply try to revive our eternal relationship with Krishna, we will properly utilize our lives. Any comments or questions?
Hare Krishna, thank you for the class. You mentioned earlier that normally people try to repress their senses, but devotees, we engage our senses, thereby controlling them in devotional service.
Yeah.
So is that to assume that, you know, any kind of service, devotional service that we do, that gives us the ability to control the senses, or is it that there are some services in particular that give us the best kind of capacity to control our senses? For example, you know, maybe, you know, cooking for the deities, or maybe book distribution. Like, is all the devotional service activities all kind of on the same platform in terms of controlling our senses and mind?
That's a very good question, to which I can give you an answer. Okay, just bear with me. Bear with me. in relationship to austerities. Because, especially in the month of Damodar or in the Purushottam month, people think that, great opportunity to perform austerities, right? I'll make spiritual advancement. So, what does Prabhupada say? Yeah, here it is. I think it's in this purport. Oh, no, there's no purport. This one. Next one. Here we go. This is 9.4.26. Purport. Severe austerities in the practice of devotional service are of many varieties. For example, in worshipping the deity in the temple, there are certainly laborious activities. Sri Vigrahara Dana Nityanana Singara Tan Mandira Marjanado. One must decorate the deity, cleanse the temple, bring water from the Ganges and Jamuna, continue the routine work, perform arti many times, prepare first-class food for the deity, prepare dresses, and so on. Okay, so what's that called? What's that activity generally called?
Deity worship.
Deity worship, yes. Similarly, the hard labour involved in preaching, preparing literature, preaching to atheistic men and distributing literature door to door is of course an austerity. Tapo yuktena, tapo divyam putrika. That's in this chapter actually. Such austerity is necessary. Yena sattvam shudyet. By such austerity in devotional service, one is purified of material existence. Indeed, such austerity leads one to the constitutional position of devotional service. In this way, one can give up material desires, and as soon as one is freed from material desires, he is free from the repetition of birth and death, old age and disease. Okay, so there's some hints from Prabhupada. Deity worship, preaching, right? These are the activities by which we engage our senses in the service of the master of the senses. So, and there may be others as well, right? Looking after the cows, growing food for offering to Krishna. There's a variety of activities. The core activities of Panchanga Bhakti are basically Shravanam and Kirtanam and Sadhu Sangha, right? Association with the devotees, which are what do you call it, impetuses direct impetus for experiencing Krishna prema. But these other activities, deity worship, preaching, they're activities by which we can engage our senses in, what do you call it, in the day-to-day routine work. Because even though chanting Hare Krishna is, a natural and an immediate impetus for experiencing love of Krishna, we can't sit down and do that all day long, right? Personalities like the Goswamis and other very advanced devotees are capable of doing such things, but generally the rank and file devotees follow a process of sadhana and service, right? So deity worship or preaching, cooking, prasadam distribution, all of the things that we do are designed to engage the senses. So they're all potent, actually. They're all potent. But the impetus for Krishna prema comes in good part for those who are sadhakas, from those association with the devotees, sankirtan, hearing the Bhagavatam, worshipping the deity, and residing in a sacred place. How's that sound? Yep, pretty straightforward. Not a lot of mystery in what we do, actually. I remember as a very young devotee, I was often reading Prabhupada's books and, looking for the key. There's a key that's going to open up the door. Then I discovered it was everything, actually, everything that we do. Although those 5 activities are powerful. They're the support, if you like. And you see, in our morning program, Prabhupada has all of those activities are combined within what we do early in the morning to set our consciousness for the rest of the day's activities, ideally. And then in the evening, we have the ISKCON sandwich. We generally don't have an ISKCON sandwich these days. We have an open sandwich. Right? But a sandwich of substance is a closed sandwich. So morning program, then an evening program, sandwich is what we do. So at the end of the day, we get the opportunity to come together and chant Hare Krishna and hear the Bhagavad Gita or some Shastra before we take rest. That's a sensible, solid program, right? Or, we preach. That's an alternative also. But within those activities, there's kirtan, there's here, some discussion, or some reading and then some discussion. So in part, it's there if we're preaching in the evenings. Yeah. Sibya.
Krishna Prabhuji, we see how in this lifetime we're with the parents for a few years and we're so attached to them. But we've been with Krishna for many lifetimes. So how can we forget him so easily? How can we not have much attachment for him?
Say that again. The first part. or the middle part.
So we see
We have affection for our parents.
we're with the parents for a few years, and we get so much attachment for them. But we see with Krishna, we've been for many lifetimes, but still we forget him so easily, and we don't have much attachment for him as we have with parents. So how do we forget him so easily?
How do we forget Krishna? Pretty easily, it seems. Huh? Well, you see, Krishna is not attainable or observable ordinarily through the senses, through our experience, our lived experience, if you like. You know, it's easy. You probably experience this. You go to school, right? When you're at school, do you remember your parents very much? Sometimes, yeah. But you can forget them completely, right? Become completely absorbed in what your friends are doing, or you just did something inappropriate and the teacher's telling you off, right? You forget everything. You're just in the moment. And of course, that's the nature of the material world, is that our original spiritual identity and consciousness of Krishna is covered by identification with the material energy, right? The example is given of a drop of water that falls out of the sky. And originally the water falling from a cloud is clear and pure, but when it hits the ground and becomes absorbed in the dirt, then it's very difficult to differentiate the water from the dirt. You've just got mud, right? The water's there, but it's mixed up with the dirt. So hard to appreciate the pure quality of the water. So because we've come into the material world, the material energy has this covering potency. It's the we're the Tatashta Shakti, and we can be covered by the material energy, or we can be absorbed in our spiritual identity. But because we're in the material world, there's that tendency to be covered over, right? So how does that happen? Basically by desire, by ignorance. And from ignorance comes these unwanted or unnecessary desires because of identification with the body, right? So the process of bhakti is designed to remove that identification, remove that covering of the material energy, so that we can reawaken our relationship with Krishna. But because we're Tatashta Shakti, we can still be influenced by the material energy. You know, Prabhupada gives the example of being on the shore of the ocean, right? And if you're not far enough onto the beach, you can always be pulled back by the waves of the ocean. You know, there's some beaches in South Australia on the there's a place called Canunda, and it's near Beachport. And there's a lot of beaches like that at Canundas. It's a beautiful place. I used to go there as a kid. But you never go in the water. Because if you go in the water, have a guess what? You're pulled in. Really, really strong waves. You don't go and swim there. Nobody goes and swims or surfs there. It's just too... the material energy is kind of like that. It can pull you in. Right? And even you may make it some way out of the ocean and get onto the shore, but if the waves increase or the weather, it pulls you back in. So the material energy is like that. We're attracted to it. It also has it's coming from Krishna. It's part of Krishna's energy, and so it has its attractiveness. But the attractiveness of Krishna is more attractive, more powerful. It's just that under the influence of the material energy, our original attraction for Krishna is covered over, right? So one sense of the process of devotional service is to uncover or reawaken that love for Krishna so that it becomes so strong and it can overpower the attraction for the material energy. So that's why we need the association of the devotees, why we need to be hearing and chanting, why we have a sadhana practice that's to reawaken that dormant love of Krishna. It's there, and what is it? Sudha chitte. Shravanadi. Yes, beginning with hearing. The process of bhakti purifies the mind. Sudha chitte. The consciousness becomes purified by the process of bhakti. And so then, by that process we can, and this is what Prahlad Maharaj is saying, by that process one can reawaken that attraction for Krishna and that satisfaction that comes from serving Krishna, such that the material energy just dissolves, it just becomes inconsequential, not essential. Right? So Krishna's with us, as is mentioned in yesterday's purport, right? Krishna's with us. He's always with us as the super soul, but even though Krishna's with us, we haven't been with him. We've been wandering in a material world, lost, looking for this, looking for that, looking for this mum and dad, another mum and dad, right? So many mums and dads we've had. And we get bewildered by each one of them. And as a consequence, have forgotten our relationship with Krishna. So, that's the process of bhakti, is to reawaken that relationship. And that's why we chant Hare Krishna. Right? And and even as devotees, we wake up in the morning one day, we chant Hare Krishna, and we're super enthusiastic. Yay, I'm Krishna's servant. Haribol. Right, then the next morning we wake up, we think, ooh, what am I doing this for? Too hard. Huh? So even as practicing sadhakas, we have our ups and downs. Right? So therefore we stick to the process, and then gradually we make progress, make advancement. Madhu Manjari.
I was reflecting in the statement when you started the class, based on we cannot avoid the contact between the senses and the object of the senses due to the nature of our interaction and activities.
Yep.
And I was wondering, what would be the safety way to do it, that dynamic?
What would be the what?
the safety way.
Or the safe way.
Or the safe way to interact, because that's something that we cannot avoid.
Well, that's why association, that's why the spiritual master is essential in guiding the disciple on what engagements are suitable depending on their conditioning, right? And so we encourage devotees to engage in activities that are suitable to their conditioned nature so they can be purified, and we don't encourage them to do things that are not natural, at least from the conditioned point of view, in their engagement in devotional activities. So we do consider the natural tendencies, and so therefore Varna and Ashram have some relevance. Whilst they're not the be-all and end-all, they have some relevance to the engagement of an individual in devotional services, so that they can be gradually elevated out of that conditioned state. Right? So there's some consideration given. If you're good at a particular activity and that can be used in Krishna service, and that's what we encourage you to do. Right? There may be something that you're not inclined to do, and we may do it in, because it's Krishna service, but if we force an individual to do something that's not fully incongruent, it's incongruent to their nature, that can have detrimental consequences. So what's safe for one person may be not good for another in that conditioned kind of state of engagement in devotional activities. So some consideration has to be made. Ashram, Varna. Of course, sometimes it's hard to work out what a person's Varna is, or they're just mixed up. Right? Sometimes we see devotees are just mixed up, they're disturbed, they can't settle, they're just mixed up. That's Kali Yuga, right? He upadrutaha, always disturbed.
If you allow me, I have another question. If you allow me, I have another question.
What do you reckon?
It's late.
Shall we let Madhu Manjari ask another question? Yep.
Sorry, I was just wondering how artificial can be, in my case, saying...
How, what can be?
Artificial.
Oh, artificial.
To say that learning to see Krishna everywhere, so it would be another way to see, even if I interact with the object of the senses, if I see Krishna everywhere, it wouldn't be risky. How artificial can be that? Because when you said that the attraction to the material energy is so powerful, but even that potency of the material energy comes from Krishna, and how safe, or even again, my wonder is.
Well, Prabhupada says it's pretty easy. When you drink water, you can think, Krishna's the taste of water.
Yeah.
Right? Krishna's the light of the sun. Right? He's the aroma of the earth. Right? Just like at the moment, even though it's winter, some of the most fragrant flowers come in the wintertime. Right? I don't know, do we have any Daphne here in the temple?
Yeah, there was some offered yesterday.
Was there? Yeah. Have you know what Daphne is? Daphne's beautiful flower, beautiful. We've got one at home. And early chair, you know, the jonquils, they're really sweet flowers. So, you know, is it the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita? The description of how Krishna explains how he's present within everything. 10th chapter, yeah. So there's a meditation there, right? Now, is that artificial? Maybe in the beginning, but if we become if we become practiced, right, then it just becomes a natural part of, you know, when you drink water, pure, clear water, when you're thirsty, how does that feel? Huh? Yeah. It's beautiful, right? So you can appreciate, that's Krishna. Rasoham apsakunteya, right? So, I'm the taste in water. I'm the fragrance in the flowers. I'm the ability in the ability in man. So, there's a certain amount of practice, a lot of practice actually, for a sadhaka that elevates one to the point where they feel a connection with Krishna everywhere, at all the time. So, in the beginning, it may be artificial, in one sense. Prabhupada gives the example of, the process of bhakti is like starting a car. Prabhupada gives the example. And he gives the example of starting a car by pushing it. We don't do it these days because you can't push an automatic to get it to start. But when I was a kid, sometimes that's the only way you get the car to start. Right? The battery's flat. When I was 10, 11, 12, we lived in same places where we used to go to Kananda, Mount Burr, and my friends, we were living in a giant pine forest. And my friends down the road, the Fries, had an old Hillman. Right? Those old Hillmans. You know what it looks like, an ambassador, basically. And we used to, I think Peter Fry was 16 and he was into pulling the engine apart, putting it back together again. So we go out in the forest in this car. But, it'd conk out. So everybody get out. You have to push the car. But then once you got it going, it ran by itself, right? So bhakti's a bit, Prabhupada gives the example, bhakti's like that. It stopped. You got to get it started by pushing it. But once it gets going on its own, then it runs off naturally. So we're kind of in the kickstart mode at the moment. And, go to sleep and forget. And wake up, think, oh, what am I doing now? Oh, got to chant Hare Krishna. Or whatever. So, yes, in the beginning maybe artificial. There's it's starting. But the process of bhakti, and Prabhupada, makes the point. Mangalarti, chanting Hare Krishna, worshipping the deity, performing those activities over time generates that impetus within the heart of a conditioned soul to relish and value and enjoy those activities of bhakti, because it removes that conditioning of material existence and reawakens our spiritual identity. So it ceases to be artificial and it becomes spontaneous. Huh? So when we wake up in the morning, we think, oh, got to go and do my service. got to serve Krishna, got to, whatever it is that we're doing, we've got to do it. And we think about it. You know, naturally we think about what we're going to do for Krishna. It just comes naturally. Last week I was recovering from the COVID, and I was in a bit of a COVID fog. You know, I just didn't want to do anything. I had a document to finish off, and I was just thinking, what do I got to do this for? I don't want to do this, right? And you know, something I've been working on for a few months. So it wasn't like I lacked enthusiasm. I just feeling really off colour. But then by Monday, and I couldn't think of anything. I was just thinking, what am I going to do? Why am I burdened by this? Right? But then Monday morning, Sunday morning, I was waking up and I was thinking, yeah, that's what I got to do. It's just stuff was coming out, right? and so I was enthusiastic about what I had to do, whereas the previous week I was feeling pretty lousy. So the spontaneous platform will come naturally, but we've got to start it by doing things that we might not initially want to do. For you know, getting up early, going to Mongolatik, chanting our rounds. I remember many hours sitting in this room chanting japa and just wanting to sleep. Huh? Or, you know, after the Nrsimha prayers and offering our obeisances, waking up to, you know, Namo Namaha to Lasi Krishna pray. Okay. So as a very young devotee, we got a lot of, or not used to being up so early in the morning, we've got the ignorance to battle with, right? So in that sense, it might be it appears to be artificial, right? And going against the grain. But gradually, as we become enthused and enlivened by those activities, and our natural Krishna consciousness starts to manifest, then the spontaneity also comes with it. So beginning, we have to push start, but once everything gets going, then we'd hop into the Hillman. We didn't have any door. It stopped so often we took the doors off. So you could hop out easily to push it. We took the bonnet off the front and we used to go into the paddocks. We had a big rope, and 2 or 3 of us would sit in the bonnet, and then we'd pull each other around like it was a sled, you know, around the paddocks. We had a great time. My mum was aghast at what we were doing. You know, easily could have killed ourselves many times. But we were having we were having a lot of fun. Until the car conked out and they said, oh, okay, get out, push. All right. Grantaraj Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki jai, Śrīla Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Bhaktivedanta ki jai.